In the near future, prisoners aren't kept in cells anymore. Now they serve their entire sentence sleeping in a pseudo-coma known as hypersleep. It's clean, automated, and much cheaper than regular prisons. However, the experience can be quite traumatic, so prisoners are awakened every few years to check that their state of mind is stable. Today Dr. Levi is doing the routine checkups on the prisoners. She shows them pictures of their families and asks them questions to confirm they understand who they are, where they are, and what they did. The prisoners' minds aren't aware of the passing of time, so they often ask about the current year. They see themselves as looking the same as the day they were put to sleep, but their bodies have actually aged a lot. Dr. David is another psychologist who is also helping a prisoner go through his memories. The man swears he didn't kill his wife, but he still has 12 years of sentence to go. David shows him a video message his daughter left him, but this only makes it worse because she hasn't forgiven him for the crime. The prisoner says that this is torture before he's sent back to sleep. While putting the prisoner back in the sleeping chamber, Valley guesses that this man is here for a crime of passion. He claims that he only needs to look at a prisoner's face to figure out what they did. David reminds him that he can't share any details, which Valley takes as confirmation of his theory. In his quarters, David listens to his girlfriend Viola play the keyboard in the bedroom and they get naughty. Later, David wakes up and notices that Viola has found a picture of his dead wife inside a book. David swears that his wife is in the past and that he loves Viola now. Before leaving for work, David reminds Viola to be careful since he isn't allowed to bring outsiders to his room. Afterward, David meets Dr. Rinaldi, who has been hired to take over his position. He was supposed to come a month later, but he's come earlier to see David in action. David is left in shock since he didn't know he was going to be fired. In private, David talks to Levi, who explains that Rinaldi showed up without warning and that's why she didn't have time to chat with him first. David swears he's given his soul to this job, and Levi says that's precisely why she has to fire him. Working this long with criminals isn't good for a person's mental health. She also thinks he hasn't handled his wife's death well because she self-deleted and he feels guilty for not stopping her, so he should have a fresh start. In the afternoon, David teaches the job to Rinaldi. The inmates are always awakened with the same pictures because they were the ones who chose them before entering hypersleep. Today's prisoner is Anna, who was given a 9-year sentence and is entitled to quarterly reawakenings. She can't remember why she's here, so David mentions that she drove her car after she'd been drinking. This helps Anna remember that she accidentally lost control of her car and killed a few people. She then has a breakdown caused by her guilt, so the computer quickly stabilizes her. During dinner, David tells Viola that he's been fired, so she tells him to live with her. They're interrupted by a kid calling her mummy, so Viola helps him find his real mother. Sometime later, David comes back from his morning jog to find protesters outside the facility. They demand to know the truth since nobody knows exactly what happens in these new prisons, and they don't think storing people like corpses is civilized. When David walks by, a protester says he's torturing the inmates. Afterward, David learns that there's been an emergency reawakening, which is why prisoner 517 hasn't even been shaved. His file in the system has been emptied. They don't know who he is or what he did. 517 calls the doctors out for knowing anything about their patients and treating them like mere numbers, but he refuses to share any information about himself. David thinks they should put him back to sleep without the test, since 517 is speaking clearly and doesn't appear to be lost. Rinaldi thinks it's a bad idea and wants to fill a report. 517 agrees and says David shouldn't make a big mistake before leaving the job. The doctors can't understand how he knows that, so 517 claims he could read it on his face. Then David goes to the storage lockers, hoping he could find a clue in the prisoner's personal belongings. However, he's already lost access to confidential areas. Suddenly he starts hearing an alarm and rushes to the sleeping room where Rinaldi is looking at Anna's capsule. It seems she's quickly losing oxygen, so David checks the cables and reconnects a loose one to fix the issue. Thinking there can't be two malfunctions in just a few minutes, David accuses Rinaldi of sabotaging the system because he's 517's accomplice and wants to help him escape. In return, Rinaldi thinks it's suspicious that David wanted to put 517 back to sleep without a test and reveals he knows he invited a woman to his quarters. Hearing all this, Valley pulls out a gun and tells the doctors to finish dealing with the prisoner before moving to an investigation. The men return to the main room and find Viola caressing 517's head. She accuses David of hurting the prisoner and he denies it, but Valley and Rinaldi believe her. After Rinaldi leaves to call Levi, Valley notices that 517 is whispering something, so he comes closer to hear him better. Suddenly 517 steals Valley's gun and shoots him before pointing it at David, telling him to handcuff himself to the chair. Once David has done so, the prisoner starts undressing and kissing Viola. To David's shock, she seems to enjoy it. Then 517 starts choking her, so David breaks the chair to free himself and uses a piece of metal to stab 517 in the neck. Both men collapse as the prisoner dies. Seconds later, David wakes up without hair and strapped to a chair. Levi asks a few questions to check on him and he realizes he's been sent to prison for killing 517. However, when he says that he stabbed him with a piece of the chair, Levi tells him that's not how it happened. She puts a picture of Viola on the screen and asks for details, so David goes through his memories. One day, Viola and her son came to the prison to record a message for her husband, who was about to enter hypersleep. After they left, David searched for her husband's file. It turned out Viola was married to 517, whose name was Carlo. He was a neurologist who was given an 80-year sentence for killing a woman with whom he was having an affair. David was already interested in Viola after just one meeting and knew she had filed for a divorce. One night, he went to her piano concert and waited for her after the show. They quickly hit it off and Viola invited him to her house. They had wine and bonded over losing their partners, then they got naughty on the living room floor. In the present, David tells Levi that he and Viola were together for 4 years. However, Levi says it was only 11 months, triggering another memory. Viola had met a man who knew Carlo well and said that all the evidence against him had been planted. Before the evidence piled up, Viola had believed her husband was innocent, so she wanted David to take a look at the file and talk to Carlo to get the real story. David refused, triggering an argument that made him realize that Viola still loved Carlo. Levi explains that a few days after that argument, David deleted Carlo's file and disconnected his oxygen to kill him. The lack of files would have made Carlo's sleeping chamber look empty and nobody would have seen his body for months. However, Anna's capsule was connected to the same oxygen supply, so David accidentally killed her too, triggering the alarm. David cries and is overwhelmed with guilt, so he asks to be put to sleep again. However, Levi reveals that the court has allowed him to serve the last 10 years of his sentence on parole. Now he must follow the reintegration program or he'll lose all benefits. Levi tells him he slept for 10 years, so he recently turned 55. Before leaving, David gets his things from the locker, but he only finds a wallet and a hat. When David goes to his new apartment building, he meets his parole officer, who tells him about the mandatory meetings with a support group. He must sign into his new job every day and isn't allowed to leave the city. The officer can check David's new place at any time and even call him to the precinct because he feels like it. Before leaving, the officer hangs the rules on the wall using the gum he's been chewing. That night, David can barely sleep because he keeps dreaming of Viola. The next day, David starts working at a hotel. When he checks the surveillance screens, he notices a man looking at the camera and using his hand as a gun, pretending to self-delete. David is suddenly startled by a gun-like noise, but it's just a kid with a toy. When he checks the camera again, the man is gone. During his first support group meeting, David learns that everyone has strange dreams and trouble sleeping, and the leader explains it's a natural side effect of hypersleep. Their brains have spent too much time dreaming, so now they have to realign with reality. When a former inmate mentions having hallucinations, David thinks she's his dead wife, who calls him out for letting her fade away. The next day, David and other former inmates have to record an ad to promote the Hypersleep program, which is also a mandatory part of his parole rules. David wants to talk about his hallucinations and how he can't eat solid food anymore, but the director gives him a few lines he can use to describe the amazing second chance he's having. When David considers leaving, he sees his parole officer nearby and decides to stay. In the evening, David is on his way home when he hears a familiar piano. He enters a bar and discovers Viola playing with a band, which is very different from the classical music from before. Viola sees him, but tries to ignore him. Minutes later, when David leaves, Viola follows him and insults him for daring to show his face. The last 10 years have been hard for her because the press has given her a hard time, so she doesn't want David to come to her ever again. When David arrives at his apartment, he finds the door open and a mess in his living room. His parole officer comes out of the bedroom reading the poetry book that David has been enjoying lately and proceeds to mock him. David calls him out for his cruelty, so the officer grabs him by the neck and smashes him on the wall, saying he won't kill him because it'd be a favor. Then the officer notices that David replaced the rule page with a picture, so he throws it on the ground and tells David to clean up. After the man leaves, David stares at the picture because he doesn't recognize it. Sometime later, David is trying to remove graffiti from the hotel's glass door. At that moment, he's visited by Valley, who explains that this particular graffiti is used to mark places where ex-inmates work. David tells him about the picture he found in his house and Valley decides it's a bad sign, so he gives him his gun and reveals he's already retired. The next day, David finds the fountain from the mysterious photo. When he looks at the door behind it, he notices that one of the apartments has the same surname as Anna. Then a man approaches the same door and David recognizes him as Anna's husband from her pictures. David introduces himself as Anna's colleague, so her husband tells him that Anna was innocent and she'd been framed because she knew too much. All people in power wanted her out, but the minister in particular was always annoyed by Anna's research. It turns out Anna had been researching the Hypersleep system. The police took all her stuff, but her husband managed to hide a box with some of her notes and all the newspaper articles about her case. David takes pictures of everything and is surprised to see Carlo's name on the papers. Looking at the articles, Anna's husband finally recognizes David as her killer, so he kicks him out. Afterward, David goes to see Viola, who threatens to call the police. David convinces her to give him 5 minutes and shares that Carlo and Anna had been researching the Hypersleep system together. Their joint death can't be a coincidence. Viola invites David in and they search the names on Anna's notes, only to discover they were all former Hypersleep inmates. It seems Anna and Carlo uncovered something about the system and they were silenced. In an old article written by Anna, Viola finds a picture of the minister with Aaliyah, the guy who approached her 10 years ago to tell her that Carlo was innocent. In the evening, David and Viola are waiting in her car and David keeps seeing his wife in the back seat. When Aaliyah leaves his office, Viola tries to talk to him, but he tells her to leave. Suddenly David bursts into Aaliyah's car and points a gun at him, demanding the truth. Aaliyah explains he always thought that the Hypersleep program was corrupt, so he sent a few classified files to Carlo to help his research. He confirms that Anna and Carlo were innocent and reveals he knows David, who doesn't remember him at all. David is distracted by the shock, so Aaliyah hits him to steal the gun. Then Aaliyah makes both of them leave the cars and checks the gun to discover it has no bullets. He cleans his fingerprints off and gives it back to David, saying this is proof he isn't a killer. Aaliyah tells the duo to never approach him again and leaves in his car. In Viola's home, she takes care of David's wound and apologizes for getting him in trouble, since she thinks this happened because she asked for his help. However, David says she's reawakened him and they kiss. They end up doing the dirty, but David soon has to leave because he has the night shift and Viola tells him to take her car. Outside, David sees the old man from the cameras pointing at his head again. This time David realizes it matches the location of his wound, but before he can ask, the man has disappeared. David then gets in the car and plays with his hat, only to notice something hard hiding under the fabric. He pulls it out and discovers an SD card. He immediately puts it in his phone and a video of himself starts playing. Before he was arrested, David woke Carlo up without authorization to interrogate him like Viola wanted. Carlo explained that the Hypersleep system lowered the inmates' defense mechanisms and opened the doors of their subconscious. Since during this time the doctors kept talking to them about their crimes, that information was fed into the subconscious too. The brain used it to create dreams and had no reality to compare them to, so those dreams became fake memories that made the criminals believe they did commit the crime. At that moment David heard a noise and told Carlo he had to go back to Hypersleep, so Carlo asked him not to tell Viola anything to protect her. In the present, David is distracted by a scream and discovers that Viola is being kidnapped in a van. He immediately follows the vehicle and sees it stop at a fancy event. After grabbing his gun, David gets in line and peeks at the receptionist list. When it's his turn, he says the name he saw and he's allowed to pass. Once inside, David finds Rinaldi and makes him follow him by telling him about the gun. In an empty corridor, David asks about Viola, but Rinaldi swears he hasn't seen her in 10 years. At that moment Minister Costa arrives at the party and David realizes Rinaldi has been working for him all along. It was Rinaldi who killed Carlo and Anna, yet Rinaldi blames David for their deaths because he reopened their files. When Costa is about to give a speech, David interrupts him by using Rinaldi as a hostage. He shoots at the ceiling and asks for Viola. He also mentions that many innocent people like him were sent to the program. However, Costa keeps talking like a politician, mentioning how Hypersleep has greatly decreased crime. After the crowd claps, David explains that this happened because Hypersleep destroys a person's identity, but Costa thinks that the previous system was even worse. Re-education never worked, but after Hypersleep, the inmates have a chance to start a new life. While people keep clapping, the parole officer brings Viola in at gunpoint. David agrees to let Rinaldi go and Viola runs to his arms, so Costa tells him he can leave and enjoy his new life. His condescension angers David, who points his gun at him. Viola makes him lower the weapon and asks him to go home together. On their way out, Viola suddenly transforms into his ex-wife and grabs the gun to self-delete. Suddenly everyone in the room disappears and David wakes up. He's back in prison, however Levi tells him he never left and that he's mixing dreams with reality. On the screen, David sees the pictures he chose before he was sedated: Viola, the fountain, and himself pointing at his head. It turns out the hand had always been pointing at the spot in the hat with the SD card. As he recovers his memories, David tells the doctor everything. Levi thinks he's just confused and forces him to look in the mirror. It turns out he's been asleep for 35 years and he's an elderly man. In a year his sentence will end, but for now he's sent back to sleep. Sometime later, Levi looks at David's pictures and starts having doubts. She checks the belongings in the locker and finds the SD card hidden in the hat. In the Hypersleep chamber, David dreams about being happy with Viola. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.